What's up, guys? It's time for Lighting 101. Buckle your seatbelts. Put your tray tables away because this one is going to be exciting. Lighting is actually pretty neat. This is kind of my area of specialty. I was a director of photography for a long time. I was a gaffer for a while. I've done grip work, electric, key grip work. So lighting, I used to work in a lighting house for 3 years. So lighting is kind of my area of specialty, and I really enjoy it. It's kind of where you get to be creative and unique. We'll go over lighting, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. Let's get started. Here we go. So light. Why do we use lighting? Well, without light, we only have radio. Whoa. Think about that for a second. Without light, all you have is sound. You'd just be staring at a black screen for a while, listening to the audio. So, lighting can give us emotions, character hints, effects. Light can even act as a character itself. The person in charge of lighting is known as the director of photography. So you have your director, which is in charge of kind of the talent and the overall film, and then you have the director of photography. The director of photography is in charge of everything that you see, so the camera and lights. So they have a very, very important job. They have to really know what they're doing. The best DP makes his or her job look as though it doesn't exist. The best compliment you can ever have as a director of photography is when you're talking to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I watched Titanic the other night and it was incredible. And you're like, oh yeah, I was the director of photography on Titanic. And they go, oh, I didn't even know they did lighting. I didn't even notice the light. And that is because the director of photography, their job is to make it look very natural. That there is no artificial lights coming in. Even in these sci-fi movies. You know, you've got, Blade Runner, which is just Roger Deakins. Oh my God, Roger Deakins is one of the few people that he walks outside, he looks at the sky and he's like, we will not shoot today. And then you're like, okay, I guess we're not shooting. Roger Deakins just said we're not shooting. So he's very good at what he does. But Blade Runner, very, very artificial lighting, lots of different colors and greens and blues, nothing that would happen naturally, but it's disguised in a way that we believe this is real. This occurs naturally in that environment, and that's the job of the director of photography. Okay, light is measured in lumens or foot candles, and then it's translated into f-stops or t-stops. This is also known as your iris or your aperture. If you look at your lens or on your camera, if it's a digital camera, you will see these numbers. 1, 1.4, 2, 2.8, 4, 5.6, 8, 11, 16, 22, 32. Now, I will say most lenses do not go to 32 anymore. It's too narrow of an f-stop. And then I would argue that if you ever find a lens that has an f1 on it, let me know. I'll come buy it because that is probably a $15,000 lens, if not way more. F1 is very rare. I doubt they make them anymore. You might see a 1.2. 1.4 is pretty common, but I don't think, even I've never personally seen an f1 lens. Now, NASA makes a lens for its satellites that's a f.98. How do they do it? I don't know. I think they trapped some warlocks in a satellite and they somehow conjure demons to produce this. I don't personally know, but that's what it is. Does anybody see a pattern? Look at it for a second. Pattern. Very good. So if you look at the first one and then the third and then the fifth, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, they all double. So These are all doubling. So if you know the first two, 1.4, 2.8, 5.6, 11 is not double. I don't know why. But if they all double. So if you know the first two, you'll get the rest. Now, one thing important to know that the sharpest part of your lens is always going to be at a 5.6. So that's going to be your sharpest part. If you're ever trying to really make sure things are in focus, make sure you're shooting at an f4 or an f5.6. The shallowest is going to obviously be f1. If you have an f1, it's going to be super shallow. And then believe it or not, even an f16, 22, and 32, those are pretty shallow as well. So it's going to be hard to keep things in focus. So you want to try and stay, I would say, right around 2.8 to 5.6. That's going to be the best part of your glass. That's going to give you the most color and everything like that. Moving on. All right, here we go. So color temperature. Color temperature is very important. That's what we're going to be covering with lighting today. So color temperature is the color reference to a specific light. Now, color temperature is measured in what's called Kelvin. Does anybody actually know what Kelvin is? Very good. Kelvin is an actual temperature in science. You measure it in science. So there is a very common types of color temperatures, and those three common types of color temperatures are 3200 Kelvin, 4500 Kelvin, and 5500 Kelvin. Make sure to know these three. These will be used all throughout our classes, especially if you're in our class for 3 years. So 3200, we also call that 32K or 32, 4500, 45 or 45K, and 5500, 55 or 55K. Okay, so here's some examples of color temperature. This is color temperature blue, or 5500 Kelvin. So we have been conditioned, believe it or not, to believe certain things actually occur naturally. So this is one of these examples. If you go outside right now, if you were to walk outside, it's dark outside, it's a full moon, what color is it? Most people are going to say, oh, it's blue, which is not true at all. If you walk outside right now and you look at it, it's going to be white. Our eyes automatically adjust. But we've been conditioned through movies that if we watch movies, you walk outside, it's going to be blue for whatever reason. So this is a color temperature, 5500 Kelvin. All right, so keep that in mind. Let's move on to the next one. Ooh, a nice movie. I think that's Samuel L. Jackson. Not true. That's Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. More importantly, I believe it's Revolutions, Matrix Revolutions. I think so. Anyway, look at the coloring. It's nice and green. Green is a very ugly color. It very rarely occurs in real life. But we try to make that a color for artificial, which the Matrix is artificial. So we use that for artificial, or if you're trying to create something that feels very sickly, we use the color green. So green is 4500 Kelvin. So we have 5500 Kelvin is blue, 4500 Kelvin is green. And then we come to our next one, which is very odd. This is a very special one, and it's called tungsten lighting. Tungsten lights are often referred to as the metal from another planet because it can take high amounts of heat and it's very durable. How high of heat? I don't know. It's like 8 million. I don't know. It's a lot of heat, all right? It can take a lot of heat. But because it can take a lot of heat, we use this for filaments in light bulbs. So when it starts to heat up, it actually gives off a warm light. And we use this mostly for indoor lighting, which we balance at 3200 Kelvin. So you see this inside your own homes. Most light bulbs inside your home are probably 3200. Now they do make daylight bulbs. I'm using my air quotes again. I know you guys can't see that, but we're using air quotes. Now they do make daylight bulbs, but most of the time we use the nice warm or orange. It gives off an orange light, tungsten lighting. And here is an example. So Mole Richardson is a very renowned company that makes tungsten lights, and you can see it. Tungsten lights are primarily used inside studios and sets if you're shooting shows. I think this is 2.5 Men. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do it in the comment. All right, moving on, we have hydrogram medium arc iodide. I'm not going to expect you to know that. I don't even know if I said it right, but we refer to these as HMIs. And this is a very, very bright light. So it creates an electric arc that gives off a much brighter light. It requires a computer to run. So it's not one of these things that you just flip a switch and turns it on. You have to actually like turn this computer on. It's a box. You turn it on, it warms up, it turns the HMI on. You can't just turn it off. You have to, again, like power down the computer. It slowly turns off. They're a pain. But they are also called sun guns because these are one of the few lights that can actually compete with the sun. So they're mostly used for outdoor shoots. And they're balanced for 5,500 Kelvin. It's a great thing, right? The bad news is they are very, very hot. Very rarely do you see these used inside because they get hot and they produce a lot of heat. So you put HMIs inside plus 100 people working on a film, it gets really hot. So people don't really like to use them inside. They use the Mole Richardsons. So these are mostly for outside. They can actually pierce through water. So all those movies that you see, they're shooting stuff underwater, they're probably using HMIs because it can pierce through water and light people. So this is a great light if you're trying to compete with the sun. Here's an example. I believe this was the movie Apollo 11. They were shooting this on the moon, but you can see up here, let's see if I can draw it. Right there, that's a giant HMI. There's 3 more up there. You've actually got, nope, that's too low. You've got a few more right there. Those are HMIs. You got some over here in the corner, right? So you got a bunch of different HMIs. Here's a, wow, that's a giant one. This one right here is, I think, a 20K HMI. That's 20,000 watts. How many watts is a household light bulb? 65, right? So this is 20,000. Slightly brighter. Not a whole lot, but slightly. Then we move on to our Kino flows. Now, Kino flows are a specific type of light we use to give off fluorescent light. They're very soft. We use these for like we call them beauty lighting. So if you're ever trying to light a model and make them look pretty, we use Kino flows. We actually have Kino flows. We call them divas because it's a type of Kino flow, so a diva. And we can calibrate that to pretty much any Kelvin temperature. If we want it to be 32 or 55 or 45, we can turn those to those colors, and they're great. These produce almost no wattage, so it takes up no energy, and they are very cool. You can actually hold these in your hand and it will never burn you. So these are really nice. The problem is you got to be really close. That's almost impossible to use these outside during the day. It does nothing because they're just such soft light. So they have their purpose indoor. They're great. Outdoor, not so much. And then we finally move into lighting 101, which is going to be our 3-point lighting. Now, this is the most basic principle of lighting, and it consists of 3 lights, which we're going to go over: the key light, the fill light, and the backlight. Now, just because it consists of 3 lights does not mean you can't have more. If you look at most movies, which we're going to take a look at a few different shots, still shots from movies, you're going to see that they use probably hundreds of lights. Let's go back to this one right here. Yeah, look, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that we can see, right? So just because I say 3-point lighting doesn't mean you can only use 3 lights. No, it's just the basic concept. All lighting is going to consist of these 3 lights: the key light, the fill light, and your backlight, and then you can kind of spread out with what you need to be creative from there. Okay, so let's go with the first one, and the first one is the key light, and it's the main source of light identified in the scene. It can come from anywhere. It can come from behind the subject, it can come from the side, it can come from straight on, but the main point of the key light is to motivate that everything is coming from this one source. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at this. Very famous shot. This was The Exorcist, the original one. I don't even know how many there are now, hundreds. But this was the original Exorcist. I believe this was the opening shot. I could be wrong. It's one of the first shots in the movie. But by looking at this, where does it look like all light is coming from? Street lamp, right? So all the light in the scene looks like it's coming from this right here. But when in reality, the light, the street lamp is just a what we call a practical. It's hardly doing anything. The lights are actually coming, well, that's way off, sorry. The lights are actually coming from right here behind that plant. It's using the skies. And then again, the windows, we have practicals lighting the windows. So the light is actually coming from behind the plant where you can't see it. That is your key light. But it looks like everything is being motivated by the street lamp. And so that's the concept of a director of photography. They are trying to conceal and make everything look very natural, that this would occur in real life, right? So there's your key light. Then we move on forward into what we call our fill light. And the fill light is responsible for filling in the shadows. Does that mean we take away all the shadows? No. You can if you want to, if that's what you're trying to shoot for. But ideally, we just fill in some of the shadows. It's typically placed 45 degrees from either camera left or right. And it's typically a much softer source than your key light. For instance, here's a shot. The person on the shot on the left, there is no fill light, and if you look on, that would be his right cheek, you can see there's a much contrastier image, a lot more shadows. And then when we add a fill light, you can see clearly the difference. So the fill light is just there to soften things. Okay, so that's a fill light. Backlight. The backlight is a light placed behind the subject that separates them from the background. This is where the DP gets really creative, depending on who you are. If you're like Roger Deakins, who everything he does, it just blows my mind. He'll get really creative with it and do some overexposures. Some like the backlight, the same exposure as the key. Some like it barely visible, but you can get very creative, like this shot right here. I think this was Shutter Island. I'm pretty positive. It was, yeah, it's Shutter Island. Okay, so look at her right here specifically, and you can see that her hair is what we call blown out. It's very, very bright, overexposed, blown out, but it's really creative. And Roger Deakins did this for a reason, and that was to make sure that it was a very dreamy sequence because this wasn't real. So they used this backlight and really overpowered it. I kind of personally like to do the same thing. I like to have a really potent backlight to light them. I think it's just more stylistic. It kind of adds something unique to you. So do what you want. The background light is used to create patterns or break up stagnant backgrounds. So if you just have like a boring background, maybe it's poorly lit, you could throw on like some color back there. These lights wash across the background and create more depth to the scene. So there's your background light. A kicker is a light that kicks or grazes the side of a face. Most action stars have a kicker on them for close-ups. Fun fact, who is it? Oh gosh, drawn a blank. Oh man, he does all the Die Hard movies. Bruce Willis, I figured out Bruce Willis it's in his contract that he must have a kicker, a blue kicker on his chin on any close-up. True fact. Very unique. But it creates depth and it gives them a very masculine look. Again, you'll see this on like superheroes. They'll have some type of kicker. It doesn't have to be blue, but it just accents the jawline, makes them look a lot tougher, like this. Whoa. So they didn't actually put it on the jaw, but you can see it on the temple on his left side. It's a blue kind of kicker that makes them look a little bit masculine and more tough. So that's a kicker. An eye light is a light that gives a slight glisten to the eyes. It creates that beauty look. It creates life in the eyes. It's very subtle. but it shouldn't affect your key light, right? You can see in this one, this is from Braveheart, and let's see if I can get my cursor to actually, I'm going to try and draw it. Let's see, way off. Sorry guys. How about here? All right, you get the idea. But you see that little glisten right there? It's very, very subtle. Probably, yep, right there. You see the white light. I'll erase that so you can see. But that is a key light, and it gives that little sparkle, because if you look at any human eye, if you look at them in the eyes, you'll see that twinkle in their eye, and that is life. So we try and create that too. Gels are heavy paper which have been matched to specific light, color, temperatures. Now these are color correction gels. Okay, so they match light temperatures. There are thousands of them out there, but they can be classified in two categories: color correction, or what we call party gels. So keep in mind the big thing with gels is any gel you add to light will decrease its intensity. So the first type we have are party gels, and I personally call them piñata lighting. They're mostly used for music concerts. Sometimes you see them in movies, very rarely, but it's just there to add color. They serve no real purpose other than to add color and create a scene. Megadeth. If you know who Megadeth is, I would high five you virtually. I doubt you know who Megadeth is. Color correction gels. These gels actually change the color temperature. Remember, we have three basic ones: 32, 45, and 55. And there are four basic gels. So we have color temperature blue, which converts 32 to 55. We call it CTB. Color temperature orange, which converts 55 to 32. We call it CTO. Minus green. Anybody have any ideas what that does? Takes out the green. Very good. We call it magenta. And then we have plus green, which actually adds green. Okay, so why would we use those? Why would we use plus or minus green? And the reason is green screen. So believe it or not, blonde hair actually has a lot of green in it naturally. So if somebody with blonde hair, say a reporter, is standing on a green screen and you try and key out that green, what happens to their hair? Well, it starts to disappear. That's why in broadcasting you'll use minus green or the magenta, and you'll use that as a backlight. That way it takes out all the green in the blonde hair, so you actually keep your hair when you key the green. So they can come in different intensities, all the way from 1/8 to a quarter to a half or full, but that gets real technical, and I just want you guys to understand the differences. Last few slides we're going over is the contrast. So contrast is the measurable unit of highlights to shadows. So high contrast, there are more shadows than highlights. Low contrast, the image is pretty evenly lit. Okay, high key, think of this as soap operas. Everything's real bright, flat, there's nothing really hidden. And then low key, think of it as a horror movie. Horror movie. Horror movie. Okay, low key, high contrast. So that's typically seen in the horror genre. It creates the effect of night. Why do we use this? Well, the simple answer is to hide things. How scary would a movie be if you literally saw the killer or the monster the entire movie, right? That's why we hide them with shadows. You can barely see them. The camera stays there, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of the shadows, here comes Michael Myers, right? Just because it appears as if there's very little light does not mean there's very little light. I would argue the fact that it's the exact opposite. It's very challenging to light a horror movie just because you need to control it, and it uses very tiny lights appropriately. So here is an example of low-key, high contrast. One of my favorite Joker performances of all time, Heath Ledger, but the lighting in this was incredible. The tones, you can see that he's got like a green backlight on his hair. Let's see if I can draw it. Yep, right there, green backlight. They use lots of purples and greens for the Joker, but you can see there's lots of shadows right? It's very high contrast. They pop a lot. There's not a whole lot of bright areas. The brightest area, other than probably these lights back here, is the Joker's face. And that's because if you listen to our lectures before about contrast and how we can draw the focus of somebody based off of that, that's what they're doing. They wanted his face to be one of the brightest areas on the screen because you have to look at it. Great choice. And then we have our soap opera effect, which we call our high key, low contrast, and it does the exact opposite. Think of 2.5 Men. Again, I like Charlie Sheen. I get it. You had to let him go. The drugs, alcohol. Yeah, don't do drugs, kids, right? And the last thing I wanted to go over is cables. Now, we have a lot of different cables based off of our needs. If I said, go get an extension cord for a light, well, there's so many different types of lights. Which extension cord do you need? So we say it to be specific. And a common extension cord is actually called a stinger. And then they have 60 amp whips, 100 amp whips, 5-wire banded, which is like, it's almost like a tree trunk. They have triax cable, which is, I would say, think of it like 3 garden hoses put together. It's very thick. It's used for sending camera signals. But my favorite is the snake. I have a fun story about a snake. So one of my first jobs, a snake, by the way, think of yourself like bear hugging a tree. That's how big around a snake is. So one of my first jobs, I was working for Walmart. We did a live show, and I was the new guy, right? And they said, who wants to wrap the snake? Well, the snake is 750 feet. And so me being the new guy, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Sign me up. And everybody looked at me and they're like, what? You're going to wrap the snake? And I was like, yes, sir. Give me the chance. I'll do it. And they're like, all right. And so it took me 2.5 hours because I had to crawl through truss and under tables and around the wall and pull it. And you wrap it in this big box, right? And so I wrapped it all. 2.5 hours go by and I go, sir, I'm done. I got it done. And he goes, you're done? And I go, yes, sir. And he walked over there. He kicked the box over and he said, do it again. You wrapped it backwards. And I was like, who would have known you can wrap a cable backwards? But you can. That's why we're here to guide you. And due to preserving the cables, there's special wiring inside. It's copper, very easy to break. We do wrap them in a very specific way, and that is over, which I will show you in a later tutorial how to wrap cables. But for now, that covers it. I hope you guys understand the concept of 3-point lighting. I hope you guys, if nothing else, walked away with different color temperatures. We have 55, 45, 32. 3-point lighting, the basic 3-point lighting contains a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And then all of the other stuff is really bonus. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you had fun. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.